Thank you all for joining us. My name's Kate Chowdhury. I will be your session moderator for today from WayUp, and I'm really excited about this session. We have some really amazing panelists joining us. The whole session is going to be focused on how to improve your interview skills. We have some experts here ready to talk you through some of their best practices and tips, and how you can start your personal journey through developing your interview skills. We have Sean B., manager at Expedia Group, Lane Garnett, Discover Financial Services, Ty Hale at CVS Health. First question, super straightforward. How do I best prepare for the interview? Ty, let's start with you.
First, I would say research the company, understand their industry and goals as an organization, but try not to overdo it. Trying to prove your knowledge. We still want the interview to seem natural, and also be certain of the position, its role, and its responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'd love to hear, Lane, how you feel about this question.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot around understanding the process. So each company has a different process. So I'd encourage you all to ask the recruiter, ask others that have been through the process, what that process looks like, so you can get comfortable with it and know how the company operates. And then the other thing is around technology. So each company uses a different technology. At Discover, we use Teams for all of our invites. However, we also have access to Zoom. So making sure that you're testing that the technology. If you don't have Teams on your computer, for us, it's hopefully that you've loaded it beforehand, but testing it, making sure the video, audio, and that you have good internet speed. Those would be some of the biggest things for me.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that. So thank you, Lane. Sean, how about you?
Yeah, Kate, I've been guilty of that myself. And Lane, I would agree with you and Ty on some of the things you shared. I also think, as a tie-in to what Lane was suggesting, is just preparing your overall setting for that virtual interview. Just make sure the background, the appearance and everything looks good. Also making sure that if you're sharing this space with other people, that they are aware that you're about to conduct an interview, that you may need some quiet time, some alone time, just some things so, they don't necessarily interrupt your interview. Each company has their own different versions of interviews. It could be a case interview. It could be a behavioral based one. It could also be a technical assessment. This one time I was interviewing this one candidate, and they had their background was all set up fine and dandy, but they didn't tell their roommates that they were interviewing this day. And the roommates kind of burged and just walked into the room and was just like, yeah, we went on a crazy binger last night. And I was just like, that's not the best thing to have happening. So it just kind of reminds me of some of the things you should do. Lane, Ty, have you all had any experiences like that as well?
I first started as an underwriter, then I was a talent sourcer, and now I'm a recruiter. But my very first interview with CVS, it was a behavioral based interview, and I was prepared for that. But they threw a curveball at me and they started to ask me math questions. So I would definitely say be prepared for anything. I mean, in the description, it did say, math skills were required. So I was able to do it on the fly. I was nervous, but give yourself some grace because, you are a human, and I believe recruiters do see that, and just don't be so hard on yourself.
Earlier today, I had an interview and the candidate was 12 minutes late because they hadn't loaded Teams and couldn't get into the system, partly because it was trying to make them join their university's team site as opposed to ours, and it wouldn't let them in. I hope that they learned from that, and as they go into the rest of our interview process, that they will, learn how to pick the right Teams link or how to access Teams correctly. So
what are the most important elements of really performing well during the interview?
So trying to get into the system, into the platform early to test it out, super important so that you are there on time. I think the most important thing for me, and this is what I do for myself too, as I go into an interview, is confidence boosting. So we're here to hear from you. We're here to hear what you have to bring. We want you to learn about us too, as through the process to make sure it's the right match. But come in with confidence and not overly confident, but come in with confidence and knowledge that you have your information, that you are representing your true self. And that really shines through. It really helps us understand if you are a good match for Discover. Be direct and concise and to the point. A lot of our questions are behavioral questions. We do have some case interviews as part of our process, but especially with the behavioral, be concise and on point. And then finally, I would say like dressing the part. So we're more of a casual organization, and I think it's okay to dress casual, but not too casual. Most of our interviews are virtual, so you can obviously dress, even if it is just from the top up, that's okay. But if you are going in person, making sure that you're dressing the part as well. So for us, casual, we wouldn't want anybody to show up in shorts because that wouldn't be something that someone would wear on a normal day here. But knowing your environment and then maybe dressing a little bit up from that, just to really give you more of that confidence and showcase yourself well.
It's okay to review questions that you think the recruiter might ask you, but don't get too focused on it, because let's say they don't ask you a specific question that you rehearsed. You may stumble, you may get a little lost or a little bit nervous. You don't really know the exact questions that the recruiter is going to ask you. So just have a general idea, definitely look into your resume, have knowledge of your resume and your skills, and you should be fine. I would also say be positive in your communications. Avoid negative comments or experiences. You may have had those negative experiences with a past company, but I think it's best to just respect the prior employer and, just try not to bash them. And, we take notice of that. And also match your experiences to the role of the position you're applying for. Match your transferable skills to position. Take example for me. I was an underwriter. I really didn't have too much experience in human resources, but I did have organizational skills. I did have time management, which was also required for the position I applied for. So don't get discouraged if your role isn't too similar to what you're applying for. Just make sure you make those transferable skills a point in your interview.
Yeah, Ty, I think that's awesome, especially the piece about matching things from your experience. I think just know your resume in general is a key component of it as well. I understand that that's what you shared with them, and that's what they expect to talk to you about. So know your resume, know what's on it, and be able to kind of match those relevant things on your resume to the questions that are being asked to you. And I'll also say this too, just about walking them through your resume and making things are relevant. Try to touch on different things. So, if you had one internship or two internships, try to touch on different elements of it instead of going back to the same situation that you may, lean heavily on. Also, too, as you start to wrap up that interview, I think it's really important to ask questions about, what's next. Ask the interviewer specific questions. It's a two-way street. So you're also interviewing that company as well to make sure this will be a good fit for you in your career. So it's a good opportunity to take advantage of that. With that said, don't ask any questions that may not be relevant to the next steps. So try to avoid some of the questions that the recruiter or anyone else on the call that may not be able to answer for you. And make sure it's truly relevant to what you need to know. But one thing that I really like to ask the interviewers themselves is about their own experience at the company. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's always a good way to kind of see, what do they like, what do they enjoy, and what are some of the challenges that they might be facing now, and how you can support and assist in some of those things there.
Yeah, I love that. I actually want to hear from Ty and Lane. What is your favorite question that you've gotten from an interviewee sort of at the tail end? Do you have any questions for me? What's your, whether it's I've heard this question a bunch of times or I've heard this one time and it was my favorite question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I'll say my favorite question that makes me really feel like the candidate's invested is, how do you measure success? Not only getting the job, but also maintaining a good work performance, and also what is the manager's management style? I definitely appreciate those kind of questions because it views more so longevity with the company.
I'm excited when a student is showing interest in the opportunity and what it's like to be an employee. So if they're asking about measures of success, if they're asking about skill development, if they're asking about even about culture and job fit, all of those things, it really helps me understand what, where their mindset is. So I don't know if I have a favorite one, Kate, but I certainly like to hear students showing that interest and really having a desire to understand what it's like to be an employee or an intern. I would say, if it's okay, things to avoid. I think Sean touched on this a little bit. I get a lot of questions like specific to our future, and I do my best job of understanding what our future looks like and where the future of the Discover's business is going. Are we getting into crypto? Are we doing this and are we doing that? So some of those questions are a little intense. So I would say maybe, stick to the job, stick to understanding what it's like to be an employee. It's okay to have some of that knowledge, but if you did read an article 6 months ago about Discover's statement, I probably haven't read that article, so I probably won't be able to comment on it. So maybe speak high level about the job. It's okay to understand more about Discover in our future, but maybe avoid some of those very targeted, specific content that you maybe read in an article.
No, I agree with Ty and Lane wholeheartedly. And as we do this every day, we get those questions often. And I agree, the questions that focus a lot on the culture and the role is really good to focus on. Also, I do think it's a great question, especially if you're walking into any type of program, whether it's a L&D program with the company or anything like that. Just kind of ask a little bit more about, hey, how do they plan to get you to that next step of that role? So that's a key question that I do think is important, because it shows that you have interest beyond this role, but also more importantly, your career growth. And we want to be just as invested into that as well. So, being able to kind of ask specific questions about that is fine. Just don't ask us, what does 10 years look like? Because we're not exactly sure what 10 years look like for us.
I like your comment about not being too scripted. And I think that can sort of cross over with the questions as well. So like, it's fine to prepare some questions and come, but maybe even pulling in something that you talked about. So it's not quite so cookie cutter of exactly what I was going to ask is the same as it is, after our conversation. How do I properly follow up from the interview opportunity? And, I think this is a key component. Sean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that first 24 hours after that interview is a great time for you to go ahead and send the interviewer, the recruiter, who all was involved in that process with you, a thank you note. And part of that thank you note is just truly thanking them for the opportunity. I also think it's a good opportunity to kind of expand a little bit more on what you all discussed during that interview as well. So if that was something that really stood out that you all are aligned with, whether it's one of the values of the company, the direction that they're headed into, that's a key time to go ahead and remind them of that conversation that you all had. Hey, I'm happy to know that, the company is moving in this direction, and I have experience in this area, and I would love to support the company's movement there. I think that's a really good idea to do once you get into those thank you notes, but be concise and be professional and be on point with them. I do tell people this too: if you do happen to land an interview on a Friday and you're looking to send that thank you note, sometimes it's better off to go ahead and get it queued up and send it out Monday morning instead of sending it out, Saturday or anything like that. Just have it queued up and prepared to go out Monday morning to them. And that's a nice reminder, since they met you on that Friday, and they can go ahead and reconnect with based on that interview that following week. Lastly, too, I would say is just understand the overall timeline. So one of those final questions you should be asking at the end there is, what are the next steps throughout the overall process? And that's a great thing that you can add in at the tail end of your actual thank you note too, is, hey, I look forward to the next steps of the timeline, or, just go ahead and toss that question right back out there again. What can I expect moving forward? And that's going to realistically give you the opportunity to understand what you can expect moving forward and how you should, appropriately respond to those inquiries that might come your way.
Yeah, great points, Sean. Ty, what are your thoughts?
I would say the best way to properly follow up with an interview opportunity is just be honest with your recruiter, your situation and goals for their career. Just reiterate, how much you appreciated, like Sean said, the opportunity to interview with them. Just let them know, based on your skills, you feel like you'd be a right fit. And also just acknowledge like, hey, I could see myself working here for a very long time. Just kind of reiterate your goals if you were to work for the company. And also I would say never ghost an organization. So let's say you did ace it, and let's say I sent you an email for a follow-up interview. Make sure to be prompt and respond accordingly, because it's never good just to ghost an organization, especially after you've had an interview with them.
Lane, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo what Ty's saying around the ghosting. So if you also receive an offer, it's okay to turn us down. We're not going to be mad at you, but let us know if you are planning to turn us down, because we likely are waiting to deliver offers to other candidates. So we want to make sure that we understand where you are and where you're, if you're planning to accept or decline the offer. So make sure that you're letting the recruiter or the organization know your intent. And then I think it's, no matter what the situation is. So if the company calls you to let you down and let you know that you're not going to be receiving an offer, stay professional. Don't go off on them. Try to remain that with that, I guess, that level of professionalism, and making sure that you're not burning bridges for the future. So we have a number of different roles here at Discover, and a lot of times I maybe have run out of spots, so I'm not able to deliver an offer, or it's just not a right fit for that position, but it could be the right fit for another position. So staying positive, staying professional, making sure that you're engaging in the right way.
I like what you said about offer and, being prompt with your response, because if you were that candidate waiting to see if someone declined an offer, you would want to make sure that they were getting back to recruiters quickly. Right. Last question. Love to hear about either mistakes that you have made personally during an interview, maybe early in your career, from each of you, or mistakes that you've seen or been involved with in early career candidates.
I would say one of the early mistakes I made in my career when I was applying for interviews and things like that is that, like, I would point out that I'm a perfectionist. I thought that's what they wanted to hear. But honestly, they're not looking for a perfect employee or candidate. They're looking for someone who's willing to learn, willing to accept constructive criticism. They're not looking for perfection. And some of the mistakes I've seen in interns, just asking the appropriate questions at the appropriate time. Like one time I had a candidate ask me, when was lunch? When was PTO? Maybe it's better to ask that question once you've actually started the position.
Great examples. Lane, how about you?
Yeah, Ty, I've had that happen quite a bit as well. So I think understanding the appropriate person to ask some of those questions is important, as opposed to asking it in the initial stages. One of the more comedic interviews that I've had, it was on campus, and they thought they were interviewing for like Discovery Channel as opposed to Discover Financial Services, both hiring software engineers. Very, very different type of work. So, if you making sure that you're applying to the right company and taking the right actions to prepare for that interview. So just a reminder on that earlier point. So that's one of the funny ones for me, Kate.
Yes, that's classic. John, how about you?
Yeah, that's hilarious, Lane. And Ty, I think what you shared too, it's very key to kind of point out, some of the things that we noticed there. And I'll say this, for me, it's a combination of what I've done early in my own career and what I see often too, which is I think it's okay for you to go ahead and highlight some of the mistakes, or I would say failures that you've had, but just talk them through how you learn from them and how you adjusted after you made those mistakes. So, I wouldn't make the mistake of confusing a company with another one. However, I would suggest, though, if you do have something on your resume that says like, hey, I set out to complete this, and if you didn't complete that, highlight what happened, what were some of the roadblocks and barriers, but more importantly, tie in on the back end, what did you learn from it and how did you improve moving forward? I think that's a really great opportunity, because as Ty mentioned, we're not necessarily looking for perfectionists or people to, necessarily come in and run the entire organization right away. We're looking for folks that is open and willing to learn and develop over a period of time. So that's something that you can definitely focus on, and something I would even recommend that you embed into your interview process itself, especially if there was something that you made a mistake on and that you've learned from. And I think that's a great opportunity to kind of give an interviewer and a company an opportunity to know that you're willing to learn.
So we're going to wrap this up. Thank you all so much for your really in-depth, valuable insight for this Interviewing Skills 101. Thank you all so much for joining us, and please reach out with questions. We want to hear from you, and we're really excited for your journey.